I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I cover legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. You all asked for me to cover this case, and this was one that I watched the coverage and I definitely had some thoughts. And thank you again for giving me feedback on cases that you all would like to see. And anytime that there's a mental health component, if there's a way that we can bring that in, that's definitely something that I want to do. I'm really interested to see the pre sentencing reports for Karen Murray and Michael Murray. Let's take a step back to talk about this case. So, Karen and Michael Murray, those are the two individuals. This is when they were arrested. Michael Murray has lost quite a bit of weight while being incarcerated, and he looks a little different. And a lot of people had questions about, was there some mental health component with them? And I think the sister's testimony was really key. So they have another adult sister who was not living in the home, and she did testify in this case. So, for a quick overview of this case, Karen and Michael Murray were charged with first degree, capital M, and aggravated neglect charges related to the death of their mother, Sheila Murray. The sad part about this case, and truly heartbreaking part, is that Sheila Murray's husband, he passed about 3 months after her death. And if he hadn't passed, he likely would have been charged with her death as well. And the defense attorneys for Karen and Michael really tried to say that the father, that Sheila's husband, that he was like very controlling, that he was the one that made the decisions, he was the one that gave the orders. But honestly, I think the state that she was found in was so bad. I think the state had to take this very, very seriously, where I don't think they intended to cause any harm. This isn't a case where there's that intent and malice, but their inaction, and she was in a vulnerable position where she could not take care of herself. So Sheila Murray, I believe they mentioned her having two strokes, but she was bedridden. She could not move, she was incontinent, and she needed ongoing care. And the defense is also going to bring up the fact that the family could not afford care and that the father really wanted to keep her at home. And it sounds like within the last 3 months or so of her life that it sounds like she wasn't fed adequately, she wasn't changed regularly, she wasn't moved. So when somebody's just laying in a bed, they can get bed sores. And she had severe infections. So she had yeast around her neck. One of her breasts had went under her arm and had stayed there to the point where like there was necrosis, like there had been decay. And the medical examiner, so I don't know that the medical examiner testified. I know that one of the doctors that had spoken with the medical examiner said that even after her death, that there was still an odor coming from her. They also said that there was a severe injury to one of her ankles where the bone was exposed, and there was so trigger warnings if we haven't needed one yet. There was feces found around, like all around her in the bed. There was the mattress was urine soaked. Like this was just a really, really, really bad situation, and she had been left in this state. And it was to the point that she had severe medical complications because of this. Um, so this is all coming out of Tennessee, Jonesboro, Tennessee. And at the time, because this happened back in 2019, so Karen Murray, she is now 49 years old, and Michael Murray is 43 years old. and they're charged with the death of their mother, specifically her being a vulnerable adult because of her physical limitations. She also could not speak at this point. She was not able to communicate verbally, and I really think that played into what the prosecution went for. She was 68 years old when prosecutors say she died at the hands of her children. But it was also her husband too, and that's he's they weren't able to charge him because he passed, but, and I think he died of natural causes, broken heart, something like that. Like, he had multiple health concerns as well, and he died a few short months after her. So in August of 2019, Sheila Murray died after she was admitted to the hospital, prompting the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to look into the circumstances of her death. Investigators said they determined Karen and Michael, her children, her adult children, were responsible for the harm that resulted in her death, and they were indicted and arrested in March of 2021. So they were free and on their own from August of 2019 until March of 2021. That was when they were indicted. Um and so Sonia Henry is the sister in this case. Let's start with a little bit of her testimony. You are gonna see Karen and Michael, and they appear to possibly they allude to mental health, but they do not give any diagnoses. Karen seems to show some emotion. The person pictured right here is Sonia. This is the adult sister that lived with her husband and 3 children in another part of the state. She was not living in the home with all of this, and she actually mentions in her testimony that she did not stay at the home because they were not really good at keeping up the house. So even before this, got to this level, they weren't good at cleaning up after themselves. It sounds like the house kind of stayed in a state of disarray. And it seems like there might have been smells and things that were kind of normal in the home. And because she saw her mom in, I want to say June. I want to say she saw her in about June. And she thought she looked bad, and she only saw her from the neck down. She did not see her leg. And the medical professionals testified that the injury to her leg, that wasn't something that had just happened, that wasn't something like just the severity of everything. It was something that had been open like that for an extended period of time. Okay. So let's hear from the sister. So this is Sonia Henry, the sister of Michael and Karen Murray.
So let's talk about the day that your mom was taken to the hospital. How did you find out that your mom had been taken to the hospital?
I got a phone call. I think it was from my sister. Can't remember if it was my sister or my dad, who called to say that they had trouble getting her out of bed, and she had hit her foot. And so they took her in because they realized that it was worse than what they thought.
Did you have immediate concerns about your mom when you had that conversation with your family?
No, because of her condition, and she had been sick for so long. I was just like, okay, keep me posted.
So the individual crying here, so this is Karen Murray, and she is going to show emotion. Michael Murray, he doesn't really show a lot of emotion um during that I saw, that I was able to see. He I would not be surprised if he had a diagnosis of um either something that possibly involves some type of psychosis or something. I would not be surprised if there was some type of either bipolar, schizophrenia, or like some type of of diagnosis. He was able to like feed and dress and clothe himself. They were able to fully take care of themselves. It sounds like they were really bad at housework. And the father, so Sheila Murray's husband, the father in this case, he said that he would make sure that the mother was taken care of. And it sounds like that didn't happen, and her care rapidly deteriorated in the last like few months of her life.
Posted since, you're taking her in and she's getting checked on, just keep me posted.
Okay.
So no major concern.
Did they keep you posted on how she was doing?
They did.
At some point, did it did you feel like it was necessary for you to come into town?
Yes, I think it was the next day from what I can remember, that I asked them to let me see her via the phone video call, and she looked worse. And they said, you probably want to come up. And so I came.
Okay. How did she look different on that video call than when you had last seen her?
Her face just looked, I can't fully describe it. She just looked worse.
Okay. Did you come into town?
I did.
Okay. And when you came into town, what did you do?
I went straight to the hospital to see her. She was in the ICU.
Did you talk to any of the doctors or nurses while you were there?
Yes, I remember a doctor coming in to talk to me when I was there.
When you saw her,
So this is Michael Murray, and he is going to kind of, in my opinion, it looked like he was glaring, and I don't know which direction he's looking, but he would do this kind of squint thing with his eyes a lot. He's going to fidget and twist his hair quite a bit. He Like I said, he doesn't show a lot of emotion, and there might be a significant mental health thing that was happening, but I don't think any potential diagnosis excuses what their mother went through. She like just the basic, you know, changing her regularly, making sure that her bed was free from feces, just like the basic things. It doesn't sound like that happened towards the end. Now, I do think it got harder to move her, and that's where I don't know if, because it's my understanding her foot, it's not just it was like it's my understanding her foot was like almost pointing in the wrong direction. Like her foot was severely injured. She had just serious wounds. One of the EMTs testified that when they went to move her, she, let out this scream. I think any amount of movement or touching her likely caused significant pain because of the sores, because of everything that was going on. And the medical team is even gonna say by the time she got to the hospital, there was really nothing they could do besides provide her with, um, just that end of life care. All they could do was make her comfortable. That is what they were able to do.
her in person, there in the ICU, what did you think about how she looked?
Um, well, again, all I could see was her head because they had her covered in a special bed with some sheets that were blowing. It was very dramatic and just different. And I could tell that she wasn't going to be with us longer.
Did you talk to anyone or the doctor about her injury to her leg that prompted the call to 911?
I asked about it, and I don't remember who the doctor was. I just remember it was a man, and he came in and he seemed very angry, which I found very.
And I wanted to explain, I think the doctor was angry like that. Let me know if y'all can hear my son in the background. He's all the way downstairs, but he is screaming at the top of his lungs, and he left my door open. And so if I need to go close my door, I will go and close the door real quick. So let me know if y'all can hear and he's all the way downstairs with my husband, but my door is open. I think the medical team was probably frustrated that anybody let their family member get to this point. I think so doctors, they do this work to help people, and I think it was she was so far gone. I'm sure the medical team was frustrated, and they didn't know that Sonia didn't live in the home. Like, they didn't know, and so I can imagine there was some anger, that the medical team was feeling. The family shouldn't, I don't know, like, ugh, but I can understand. It's my understanding, like, I'm trying to use YouTube friendly language. It was bad. It was really, really bad, and she was in so much pain, and, the doctor, because I am gonna play the end of the ER doctor's testimony, because she gets emotional because she just wanted, somebody to take care of her, and the doctor probably felt like, she wasn't being taken care of at home, which was clear.
Very disturbing. Not that he was angry, but just the way he was looking at me, I was uncomfortable. And he began to tell me that he thought um, that what had happened to her wasn't matching up with what my family said.
Because the family was saying that she had just hit her leg, or that she had just, like something must have just happened, and the injury looks like it had been that way for like, probably a month or 2. Like, it looked like it had been there a lot longer, and so I'm sure the doctor is probably like, "How did nobody know that it was this bad?" Like, and, um, yeah, this is a hard one.
Did you see her injury?
Briefly, he lifted it up. They had already set her foot. So yeah, I got to see it.
What did you think about it when you saw it?
It looked terrible.
Okay.
Terrible.
I know.
And they're gonna ask the sister if she had any concerns about her, um, mother being in the care of her sister and her dad, and she's gonna say no. Now her preference would have been for her mom to be in some place where she could have had more care, but, her dad was refusing that. I'm coming forward to the defense cross-examining her. The defense is going to try to make it sound like, they're gonna try to bring up mental health, and I think there must have been some things that the jury couldn't hear, or there was something, because the prosecution is going to object, and whatever she was about to say is not going to come up. It's, to my knowledge, nobody's specific diagnoses. They are gonna mention that, Michael was on medication and that he would sleep until, like, noon. They're gonna mention things like that, but they're not gonna give specifics of any diagnoses or anything like that.
Miss Henry, now,
Once again, we have fast forwarded in time to the defense cross-examining her, and they're really gonna try to say, "Your dad was the one who was in charge. Your dad was the one who made the decisions," and they're gonna try to kinda put it on dad.
the discussion on coming home from Cornerstone presented to you as though it was some sort of democratic election, but that's not really the way the hierarchy worked in that house, was it?
No.
It wouldn't matter if what Karen and Michael would have said. If your dad wanted it to be a certain way, that's the way it was going to be. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay. So whether they opposed it or what they felt about it, when he decided your mom was coming home, that was what was going to happen, right?
Yes.
Okay.
For anyone joining, the father he died 3 months after, about 3 months after, his wife back in 2019, and if he was alive, he would have been charged as well.
Do you feel like your dad had how he felt? I think you've testified some to this already, but he felt a duty to your mom to try to take care of her.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, Financial issues aside, that's his wife. He wanted to try to take care of her the best he could, right?
Yes.
Um, was that kind of feeling? Was that something that was instilled in you all as kids?
Yes.
Okay. You feel like your brother and sister learned that from your parents?
Yes.
Okay. Um, did y'all get taught, I mean, as far as your siblings voicing any sort of concern about this, that they were, if you're
All right. So there are some great questions. Retired RN. So I think she visited in June. I don't know. So y'all correct me in the chat. I think things might have been slightly better when during her visit in June. Her mom passed in August. And so I don't have the exact date of when she went. Let me see. So I know the mother passed in August. And I think she was used to the house like, I think there was a smell already in the house without this that they really didn't keep up with the house. She never stayed at the house. She would stay in a hotel, and I think she would probably go in and visit with her mom, and then she would probably leave. If she had seen feces, if she had seen what that medical team saw, I think she would have said something. And so, uh, she only saw her face, and there was a blanket covering the rest of her. And so, I do believe so this is just my own personal thought, that if she had known how bad things were, I think she would have said something.
your father thought that he was doing his duty, trying to take care of your mom the best that he could, that your siblings were doing but like they were doing their duty also.
Yes.
Okay. Whether they were over their head or not, I mean, that's one thing. They can be completely over their head, but they're doing what dad wants and what's been instilled in you.
So people are talking about her being charged with negligence as well, and that's where I want to make sure that we're talking about this from a place of compassion, where I think there was a nurse that visited the house. So the mom had a home health agency that would visit every 3 months. I think during the time that things truly decompensated, I don't think anyone came out to the house. I don't think anyone was there. And uh sometimes there can be a gap between someone's best and, like, I don't think she thought they would ever let it get to this point. I could be wrong, but I don't think she thought it would ever get this bad.
You all to try to do right. I don't know if we need to. You, we're going to let the record reflect she responded in the affirmative. I don't know if it
Yes.
talk only drank today or things like that. So, were there times that they tried to get her to eat and drink and that she wouldn't?
I would assume that could have happened. Yes. But I know, as I'd stated earlier, I would send an insurer. So that was kind of like the backup that she would
Okay.
drink those.
All right. But you were, I mean, you said you have three children. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're down there having your life, having 3 kids and trying to keep up with that. You're trying to run your life. So, I mean, you've got enough to keep up with as it is. As far as like the day in, day out there in the house, I mean, unless other than the days you came to visit, there's no way for you to really know what was going on, how things were happening there. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
So she just didn't know. I honestly I don't think she knew just how bad it was. All right. So we are gonna skip ahead and hear from the medical doctor who is going to talk about just that kind of last period of time. And she's testifying via deposition, a video deposition. And so they're going to show parts of that. The audio on it are not great. It's not great. I'm going to try to not interrupt it so that we can hear.
Replace this external fixation device, and then later discussion about whether or not we should proceed with amputation.
Okay. Do you know if her leg was amputated?
It was not, because Dr. Goss deferred that to my clinical judgment. I'm certified to do amputations. He's the orthopedic specialist for limb salvage. I did not feel that an amputation would have been in this patient's best interest. She would have had a very difficult time healing any wounds that I would have created surgically due to her malnutrition. She was in an advanced state of debility, and given that she was in such a severe state, my inclination was that she needed to have a palliative care consult with goals of care discussion. I felt that she would have been best served by providing comfort rather than an amputation, which would have caused a significant amount of pain in what I consider to be an end-of-life scenario.
Based on your training and experience, if she had received medical attention earlier with regard to the fracture of her right ankle, would that have possibly changed the prognosis?
I believe it would have possibly changed the prognosis of the ankle fracture. The treatment for ankle fracture would be reduction and fixation within 24 hours of presentation. I don't think this was anywhere remotely near 24 hours of presentation. Would it have changed her overall prognosis of her end of life? Not necessarily, because she had other things that were contributing to her debility and to what I consider to be an end-of-life scenario, the majority of which centered around the severe malnutrition. When you've lost that much of your skeletal muscle mass, the likelihood that you...
So it wasn't just the smell, it was also that she wasn't being fed enough. And that was the job of the husband, Michael, and Karen. They were the ones that were taking care of her, and she had lost that much weight. And they were not turning her regularly. Like there was a severe thing that was going on. So there's competency to stand trial, and then there's the person's mental health at the time of the offense. And competence for trial is just, do you know who the judge is? Do you know who your lawyer is? A person can be competent for trial as long as they're not actively psychotic, as long as they're not, they're cooperating with their lawyer. And so they likely were competent for trial. And they had held jobs before. They took care of themselves. Now they lived with their mom and dad. So Michael and Karen never moved out of the home. They always lived in the home. And that's where I do think the father also has some culpability, but he's not here. And but that's where, if it was my parent and I was one of the caretakers and we couldn't do this, I would have called my sister to say like, "Hey, we can't do this. This is too much. We really need some help. Mom is going downhill fast. We need some extra help." And those things did not happen. Okay?
You would heal anything, even if it comes with an acute presentation, is very low.
Okay. Hold on. This, you saw Miss Murray in 2019.
Yes.
This is the part that I think is going to bring up emotion for the doctor.
And is there anything about this case that particularly has stood out to you?
Yes. I've been doing my job since I began residency in 2005. I've been a certified surgeon in the state of Tennessee since 2010, and I've been in the active practice of trauma, which these things present as traumas usually. I've seen cases of neglect and abuse in both children and adults, and there are patients that stand out in your memory. And Mrs. Murray will always be in my memory because of the severity of the neglect and how much compassion and emotion I felt for her.
Thank you.
So I thought that was very powerful testimony from that doctor, just talking about the compassion that she felt for her. And it's almost as though, and we don't know what happened. It's almost as though Michael, Karen, and the dad, they just stopped taking care of her. Like, it seems like they just stopped taking care of her. So she probably got to the point where she would fuss if they moved her, but it was because she was a nonverbal and she was probably in a lot of pain. But I think they just stopped. I think they just stopped taking care of her. And you can't do it because, and from what I've seen, it sounds like she was almost just left to die, and I don't think they had the intent. Like, I don't, but their actions led to her death, and that's that's definitely a problem. So the prosecution did a phenomenal closing, really putting it all together. I did think it was important for us to talk about the side of the defense because the defense is going to blame dad. The defense is going to say like they didn't have enough money, they didn't have enough resources, they didn't know. She did. So she had 2 strokes. She had 2 strokes and she was nonverbal. She could not physically move and she required 24/7 care. Like she required an intensive care. Um, and I do think it came to a point where it was too much. If they had reached out to adult protective services because maybe let's say finances were an issue, but it sounds like the sister might have helped pay if they needed a nurse to come in. If they needed something, I think there could have been resources available. It doesn't sound like they reached out for it. And even with the 911 call on the day that she went out to the hospital, it sounds like the call came in as, "Hey, my mom fell down, we need medical help." But and then when the medical team got there, they realized, "Oh my gosh, like this is a life or death situation." And that was when, and it's my understanding that the father was crying, but I think at this point the war, like everybody was going to see just how bad things had gotten and how over his head he was. And it sounds like he wouldn't admit that he needed help and that this was too much. And I don't think Karen or Michael would have stood up to him. I don't think they would have, but they were in their like late 30s to early 40s. And I think that's where people are saying they they're now responsible for this. That's what the jury decided. So, let's hear from the defense. So, I think this is Michael's attorney that's going to go first. Yeah.
You know, when we started this trial,
And this is Michael doing, he at times he just kind of fidgets with his hair.
we talked about the fact that this is a family thing. I said that in my opening. The family here consisted of Edwin, Murray, the father, Sheila, the mother, Michael, Karen, and Sonia. And this was a tightly knit family. They cared about each other. They loved each other. The family was limited as far as financial resources. No doubt about that. That was an issue in this case. When Sheila had a stroke, the family pulled together because they wanted to make sure that she was taken care of. We heard from Sonia when she testified that in the beginning, it was good. In the beginning, it was good. Sonia also said that as far as the caregiving went, there was a hierarchy. Okay? What was the hierarchy? The hierarchy was Edwin.
The father.
And I know you haven't heard his statement, but Edwin, we know from Sonia, is the one who made the decisions. And then it was Michael and it was Karen who did what their father wanted them to do. That is the way it worked. That's the way it works in a lot of families. There is one that leads.
Just because that's the way it is doesn't mean that that's the way it should be. And that's where I don't believe in blind obedience, where you do what I tell you to do just because I told you to do it. I want my child to have critical thinking, where if I'm taking care of my husband and my child is helping out and he realizes, wait a minute, dad is in his own waste. Like like that he could speak up and say, "Hey mom, we need to be doing this better. Like we need to do this." And if I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, I would want my son to reach out to my in-laws, to my mom. I would want him to speak up. So that's where I'm trying to raise a critical thinker. Now, I do think the way that they were likely raised, they probably didn't have the ability to speak up. And she was briefly in a nursing home. So after I think maybe the second stroke, like there did come a time where she did go to a nursing home. I think Edwin wanted control and I think he wanted his wife at home. Like I think that's just what he wanted. He was a retired Navy, like he was in the Navy and he was retired. I think he wanted her at home. I think there would have been resources available if they had spoken up and said just how, but they had to speak up sooner. By the time they spoke up, she was already terminal and not from like diabetes but she was terminal from the neglect, from the lack of care. And that's where it became a crime.
And others that do what they're supposed to do. Now, we know from Sonia's testimony.
I'm gonna speed him up just a little bit. He has a lovely cadence, but it's a little. So I'm speed him up just a little.
The care was good, and we know that Sheila was a strong-willed woman. We also know that she wanted to stay at home. Now, as time progressed, Sheila's health began to decline.
There was a great question. Was there any ever was does the testimony ever address the question of why the brother and sister didn't tell the sister, Sonia, something was very wrong? And so it comes up in Sonia's testimony that if one of her siblings had said something wasn't okay, she would have stood up to her father with them. So she says Karen was really the one that she talked to. She really wasn't that close with Michael, and that Karen was the one telling her that everything was okay. And yeah. So once the father was deceased, it's my understanding the home fell into like disarray. So Karen and Michael were not able they did not manage it once the father was deceased. Because I don't think they cleaned up after themselves. Like, I'm guessing maybe they didn't do dishes. I'm guessing, like, it was probably bad. They probably didn't throw away trash. And so the home got to a pretty bad state after the father died. And so, all right, I know. And so that's where I know some people are having trouble understanding Sonia. I have been exposed to families like this where there's this secret because I think they saw Sonia as the one that left and they might have seen her. So remember, Sonia didn't stay at the house. Sonia probably didn't agree with like, their lack of housekeeping and things. And in some families, you can be viewed as the snooty one or the bougie one or the uppity one. You can be viewed as you're too much. You expect too much. Your standard is too high. And so I do think they hid things from her. That's just I've seen situations like this, and so that's just my.
And in early 2018, we know that she went to the hospital and she was there for about a week. And then she went to rehab at Cornerstone. And she was in rehab for approximately 20 days. At the end of that 20 days, a decision had to be made. Is she going to stay in a facility like this, or is she going to go home? Who made the decision? Edwin made the decision. And yes, my client even said that they were worried. Edwin was worried about finances. How would we pay for that? How would we pay for that? The decision was made by Edwin, and Karen and Michael were there to take care of their mother. Now, Agent Pritchard asked my client, what was the routine? What was a routine day like? Now, this is not necessarily at the end, but this is like maybe when she came home from Cornerstone. What was a day like? We would talk to Sheila. We would communicate with her. We would get her up so that she could use the bedside commode. The sheets on the hospital bed were changed several times a day. She was fed and she was given liquids, things to drink. The family never left her alone. There was always someone that was there. Either Edwin, the father, Karen, the daughter, or Michael, the son. We also know from Sonia's testimony that my client has some issues. She, in her opinion, he can't even take care of himself, but he was part of the team taking care of.
And that's where he ends up being found. Like if the dad had never said, "Me, your brother, and your sister will take care of your mom. Like we can do it." If that had never been the plan, okay. But Michael, is my understanding, he was the one who could physically lift her. He was the one that could do the physical work. Karen would help out, and the dad was there as well. And so that's how they end up being responsible for this.
The mother. They were all doing what they could do. And yes, what he was there to do was some of the heavy lifting. That was his role. He took medications that made him sleep, sometimes until noon. And there, when you talk about what one person can do for someone when they don't have any help until maybe midday, that makes things difficult. No doubt about it. It makes things difficult. But the family never left her alone. Miss Romans was a nurse practitioner that would visit approximately every 90 days. And she surveyed the situation. She monitored Sheila's health. She did those tests that was talked about. And she never saw anything that would cause her to want to or required to contact the Adult Protective Services from what she saw. During the time that Miss Bromans was visiting, there was the one canceled appointment. And why was that canceled? Karen was not feeling well that day. We know from Ms. Roman's testimony that she never spoke to Michael about Sheila, and she never contacted the spouse about Sheila. She never got in touch with Edwin. Sonia has testified when we talk about this missed appointment. Sonia has testified she met with her mother in February, and she met in July of 2019. She saw her mother, and she stated she did not see anything out of the ordinary. Sonia felt, however, that her mother did not recognize her. Her mother was declining, no doubt about it. But she also said that the family was taking care of Sheila as best they could.
And that's where it wasn't enough. She needed more care. It wasn't enough. They were definitely in over their heads.
You know, I've listened to the testimony of all of these witnesses, just like you all have listened to all of these witnesses. And I have to tell you, in the jury instructions that we received this morning, there are 3 types of crimes. There's knowingly crimes.
So we're talking about so I think the nurse that came to do home visits every so often. I wonder if that was more something that was provided through insurance, where it was just somebody to check in to see if she needed appointments, kind of like a care coordinator. I've seen insurance companies pay for something like that, or if because she had difficulty getting out of the house, if somebody came to just check her vitals and everything there. I did not find the testimony of Miss Romans, so I did not see that testimony. Court TV had certain testimony available because I do think there is a police interview with Michael and Karen. I have not seen those yet. The defense is going to reference those.
There's recklessly crimes, and there's a crime of negligence. I have to tell you, in looking at the legal definitions that you have in those jury instructions, please pay attention to them, because I think you'll find that with the testimony that we've heard, the proper verdict in this case is not guilty. Not.
And for me, it sounds like there was negligence, and so then the next defense attorney is going to come forward. And he has to take a break midway because I think lunch is there or something. So he's going to start and then he's gonna come back and finish later.
Later, that's okay. All right.
So this is now Karen's defense attorney.
Folks, first thing I want to do, cases like this are never easy for anyone. And I want to thank you for your time and your attention on this. There's never a case like this, no matter what angle you look at it from, it's easy for anyone to deal with. And certainly, I know it's appreciated by all of us that you all came in here, did your civic duty, sat through all this, gave us your time and attention. So just want you to know that's very much appreciated. What Karen Murray and Michael Murray are guilty of is being poor. Being poor in a country where at some point it became normal for families to have to do the kind of calculations that the Murrays had to do. That when it came time that somebody got sick, somebody got old, whenever that showed up at your door and you had to figure out what to do, that it became normal for families to have to scramble to figure out what to do and how they're going to get adequate health care. It became normal for people to have to worry about losing everything that they had, losing their homes, losing, what little bit that they tried to scratch out their whole lives just because somebody had gall to get sick and get old. At some point that became normal.
He's making a good point. I don't think it applies to this case just because the level of neglect was so severe. Because it wasn't just that like she was injured, it was also just the significant neglect. Like that's and it's almost as though I don't know if they don't know when she was injured or if they were hiding when it really happened, because that's where the medical team is frustrated. Like, we don't even know what really happened to her, what's really going on. They didn't feel like they could trust the dad, sister, and mom, sister saying Karen, to give them accurate information about what was going on with her.
Don't know why, don't know who to blame for it. And I wish it weren't that way, but that's the way things are. And that's the situation that the Murrays found themselves in. The reality of it is that people like Sheila Murray, people like Tony Murray should have never had to worry about finances, never had to worry about what they were going to do as they got older in terms of being able to have adequate health care. You know, Tony Murray served his country in the Navy and then his community, the Johnson City Police Department. So he wore a uniform for 36 years in service to his community. And his wife for 46 years, Sheila, was even more important because she was a bedrock for a family. She was a foundation for her husband, for 3 children. And they should have never had to worry about being in a position where they have to put their children in a place where their children are going to have to care for them. Their children who don't have the qualifications to do this, with the limited finances, a limited resource, with their children not having the knowledge, the experience to have to take care of their parents.
And notice he's not saying capacity. It wasn't that they lack the capacity, but I think anyone would know to keep feces off the bed. Like, I think that's where some of this isn't completely lining up. So he's going to stay on that point. I want to skip ahead a little bit. Um, Medical insurance. Okay, because he makes some good points that I just want to hear. So, because the jury is going to disagree with the defense, and we're going to listen to the verdict in just a moment. So here is the second part. He has went on to talk about, the limited resources, finances, the different things that kind of came into play.
I'm going to talk about, along the same lines, when you talk about repositioning, Sheila. You heard Karen Murray talk to Agent Pritchard about how hard it was to move her mother, that she gotten stiff and that she tried to roll her over, but her mother would continue to roll back to the same side, that she tried to roll her over and she continued to roll back. And then she tried to keep her from rolling over, but she just keep going back to the same place. What do you do when your own mother is fighting you? When you're doing what you think is the right thing, but she continues to fight you and you're there in the moment, day after day.
But so what he's saying, I hear what he's saying, but it doesn't match with the level of neglect. Now, I've had some clients have their parent at some point, a parent that they're caring for, they stop eating or something, and they have to talk with their medical team. The medical team monitors their weight, and they talk with the team about what options there are. So maybe the person ends up eating, I can only get them to eat ice cream and bagels or something. And you just kind of have to go. But the medical team is aware and everybody is monitoring it. It sounds like they were doing this on their own. And sometimes there can be a lack of trust with medical communities. But in my opinion, from what I've heard, it sounds like there was more of a stubbornness. Like, nobody's going to tell me how to care for her from the dad. And just this, like, not seeing just obviously how bad it really was. Not ugh. 'Cause the way they describe the house, it almost sounds like a hoarder type situation, and sometimes with obsessive compulsive disorder, where like on severe ends, I'm talking severe ends, where a person they get very obsessive and they're only taking care of these things, and I have no knowledge that anything like this is coming into play. My brain is just trying to make sense of it with the knowledge that we do have. It sounds like the house was in a bad spot, which was why Sonia didn't even stay there. And so,
And all you want to do is make her comfortable. And she keeps rolling back to this position because it seems like it makes her comfortable. What do you do when you're her? Do you keep fighting your own mother? Do you keep forcing her to do things? Which might be a little easier if she was in a nursing home, because they could do that. They know, number one, that it's necessary to do that. It's necessary to reposition a person. But number two, they're not dealing with their own mother. They're not dealing with the prospect and the fear of hurting their own mother. And again, it's something that by trying to make your mom more comfortable, you end up causing problems you don't even realize are going to happen because you don't know any better. You don't know the extent of how those problems how far those problems can go. You're trying to, there in the moment, trying to make her feel better, trying to make her comfortable because she
And that's where it's hard to say that they were trying to make the mom feel better, and she was in so much pain, open wound, and surrounded in her by her own waist. And so, yes. So he likely would have, so I think she had medical care, and I work with people with TRICARE. I work with people that have TRICARE for life, where they also have Medicare and TRICARE. And, so I don't know what insurance he had. I do know that there are some insurances that will make sure that the person has, um, a home health aide that comes in periodically. It sounds like he also worked for a significant period of time for the local police department as well. So some people have 2 retirements or they have multiple medical plans. I don't know what they had. They did make it sound like it was a lack of resources, but I don't even think they asked for what was available, and he just wanted to keep her at home. And that's why I bring up the whole, like, hoarder, because I've seen some people where they don't want somebody in the house all the time. Exactly, Kelly. I think he was also retired from the police force as well. I think he retired from both. He was retired Navy and then also retired from the police force as well. And so, everything they're saying, I was not surprised at all. There were some lesser included charges, so I wasn't sure if the jury was going to find them guilty of first-degree murder. They did. Um, they did. And I guess the law in Tennessee, because I don't think they intended, but their inaction, and because she was vulnerable and she couldn't move, she couldn't speak, she did not have a voice, she had no way of getting help for herself. I think that's what turned it into first degree. And so let's go on ahead and watch the verdict.
Ms. Farmer, as to defendant Karen W. Murray in case number 47002A, in count 1 for the offense of first-degree murder and commission of a felony, which is aggravated neglect of a vulnerable adult. How did you find?
So in the it was also aggravated neglect, and wow, for a vulnerable adult. Like that's what made it first degree. My understanding, not a lawyer, psychologist here.
Find the defendant Karen Murray guilty or not guilty? No, you can just say if you found her guilty or not guilty
Guilty.
of the indicted offense. All right. As to Mr. Michael Murray in case number 47002B, did you find the defendant guilty or not guilty of first-degree murder during the commission of a felony aggravated neglect of a vulnerable adult?
Guilty.
All right. As to count 1 for Ms. Karen Murray, so say you all. All jurors agree on the verdict. All have nodded in assent. As to Mr. Michael Murray in count 1, so say you all as to the announced verdict. All jurors nod in assent. All right. Ms. Farmer is foreperson of the jury.
And that's it. So the jury found them guilty. And yeah, the reason why I think people wanted for me to cover this case was just because it seemed like something was going on with them. So it's up to the prosecution to determine what to charge. And so, Kelly Alexander, don't you think manslaughter would have been a better charge? And I think if the neglect hadn't been so severe, I think because she was immobile and she could not speak, and all of those other things, she had no way of getting help or safety, and it sounds like they were not honest. I think if they had called the minute her foot was damaged, like, immediately, if they had reached out for help as soon as her foot, whatever fracture to her foot, if they had reached out immediately, I think I think it would have been different, and, I think it was because of how long things went and how far things went, and each prosecutor, they're going to determine what they can prove, because I wonder if they offered them a plea deal to a lesser included. I don't know. So I don't know if they were ever offered, a plea deal. Night owl, I also get possible developmental disability. That's where, I know people often bring up, autism spectrum. I don't know, or possible, intellectual disability. I don't know. But the dad thought that they could do this, and, they might have both completed high school. So I think anyone would know to not leave human waste by open wounds or on the bed to the point where it molded. I think I think the state that she was found, I think it was just that bad. And when they called, everybody else was getting the idea that it wasn't an emergency. So it's my understanding, I didn't play the testimony of the emergency personnel. There was a paramedic, I think it's paramedic, that testified, and when they got there, they realized just how severe everything was, and so, I don't think education. I think somebody without, who had only finished 5th grade could have known to, like, change the person at least once a day. It's my understanding the wound on her back was so bad that, she just had infections. Like I said, the one, she had, like, everything was just so, so, so bad. She was the only words that are coming to my mind are, like, rotting. Like, that's what was happening, and I believe the medical examiner, so they didn't testify, but like I said, that doctor mentioned the fact that her body still had a smell of pus, and, like, there was still a smell after she was deceased, and so, this is a truly, truly sad case. Um they're gonna sentence them, and I don't know what will happen with sentencing, if the judge will consider any mitigating evidence at that point. Um, Lizzie, that is correct, and I saw you mentioned that you're in the UK. The United States, I wish we had more care. Like, I wish, medical debt wasn't the thing that could send people into bankruptcy. I've also known people to, do financial things to get somebody to have them qualify for Medicaid, where, like, they're able to have it where the person can have a home health aide, but sometimes that requires some financial gymnastics or just a lot of different things. And so, she was living on a hospital bed. And so I'm just gonna say what Kelly Alexander said. That's where I think this goes beyond. I think they had just given up and they had just stopped. And it was too much and they didn't ask for help. She was on a hospital bed with no sheet that was soaked and soaked with. And then, mm, mm, okay, like, there was this is a sad case. I think the only other one that was worse was the one where, the woman that didn't move and her parents were charged. Now, this is where people get upset about Tracy Ferreter not having any jail time after, because the child in that case survived. Nothing bad happened. Well, not nothing bad. He has significant trauma, but he survived. He escaped. And often when people escape, and I'm so glad that he did, sometimes the punishments don't always fit. But then when situations like this happens, it just depends on the jury, it depends on the prosecutor, it depends on what they think they can get across. How was um Chris Greger, how was he not found guilty of I think he was found not guilty of second degree. Like to me, if I was on that jury, I likely would have tried to like I think he would have I would have I think he was guilty of second degree, but that's just my own personal thoughts. The jury, I think, convicted him of manslaughter, I think. And so um hmm, it's just you never know. Legal cases, that's where I try if I have a family that's been a victim of violence, I try to have them not tie their healing to the court result because it often doesn't feel fair. And it often never feels like enough. Uh, yeah. And so very, very sad case. This Saturday, we will see. I don't know what I'm gonna cover this Saturday, but definitely going to cover something different this Saturday, and then in a few weeks, I am gonna cover the "Let Me Love You" documentary. Ooh. Was that what it was? I think that's what it's called. I think I think that was the one on Netflix. It's the Netflix documentary, um but there's a Netflix documentary that I'm gonna cover in a few weeks, and so, I almost didn't watch that one. It was done better than I was expecting, and so, I did watch it, and I have some thoughts. Okay, I have to find the name of it now. Give me a second to let me Tell Them You Love Me. That's what it's called. So I'm gonna cover the "Tell Them You Love Me." Thank you for the $5. I really, really try to come from it from a place of compassion and understanding. Yes, tell them you love me. It's ugh, ugh. But I have some thoughts and I'm gonna cover it in a few weeks. All right. And so I'm gonna go drink some water. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.